All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about multiplying fractions, which I'm sure this is a review for most of you, if not all of you. And the awesome thing, I know we're kind of just jumping right in and starting with multiplying fractions right out the gate, but I figured since I'm not there, this is something hopefully that you guys can all do. So the awesome thing about multiplying fractions is that if you can multiply fractions. So the top number of a fraction, let's see, we have 4/5. So the top number is called the numerator, and the bottom number is the denominator. I always think denominator, it starts with a D, so think down, and ignore the dogs barking. Okay, so D down, denominator is the bottom number. Awesome. That was just to give you a little background, so when I say numerator, denominator, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, there we go. All right, so when you're multiplying fractions, all you have to do is multiply straight across, meaning numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So we have 4 times 2, which is 8, 5 times 3, which is 15. We're going to talk about simplifying in a minute, but this fraction is in lowest terms. It's already simplified. So we have 8/15. Multiply straight across, simplify or reduce, and we have 8/15. So we're going to go to the next blue problem. We multiply straight across. So if you have paper in front of you or your whiteboard, go ahead. I'll give you 1 second to do that. Just remember, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So we have 7 times 1, which is 7, and then 12 times 2, which is 24. Now, there's no way to reduce this if you look at it. 7 does not go into 24, and there are no numbers that both the numerator and denominator will divide evenly into. We'll talk about reducing here in a second. So to give us more room and to make the page a little less crazy, I'm going to go ahead and erase this apparently in the slowest way possible. Awesome. And we're going to work on these orange problems. So while I'm erasing, I want you guys to look at this top orange problem. And let's use purple. Purple is fun. So we're going to multiply the numerator times numerator, which is 4 times 1. And then the denominator times the denominator straight across, which is 5 times 2, and that's 10. So this is the first time in the set of problems that we have to reduce. And when somebody says to, find your answer in lowest terms or reduce the fraction, all you have to do is figure out what both the top and bottom number will divide by, and you'll get a whole number answer. So for instance, the top number we know, let's switch it up. Let's use Journey's favorite color. You might not be able to see it. So we know that we can divide 4 by 2 and that we can divide 4 by 4. For 10, we know that we can divide it by 2 and 5, and then obviously 10. Awesome. Okay, so then you find, okay, what two numbers are the same on the top and the bottom? Obviously it's 2. Sometimes when you are reducing fractions, it can be a little tricky when you get some really high numbers. So the first thing I always do is look to see first if they are both even numbers. If they're both even numbers, obviously they'll both divide by 2 and you can start there. Or if they're, also really high numbers, if they end in a 5 or a 0, then you know that you can divide both numbers by 5. That's just a good way to get the numbers a little bit smaller and into numbers that you're used to working with, so then you can find other numbers to divide by. So we know that we can divide both of these by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So when you multiply 4/5 times 1/2, we get 2/5. With multiplying, it's a little bit more difficult to actually picture because your fractions are actually getting smaller. When you multiply fractions together, they get smaller. So when you see this multiply, you have to think of the word of. In this problem, we were trying to find 1/2 of 4/5. So if you look at it that way, 1/2 of 4/5, well, that would be 2/5. So we're looking for half of this top number, 4, which is 2/5. When you guys, in a little bit next week and moving forward, when we're doing multiplying fractions, but they're word problems instead of just problems written out, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, if the word of is in the problem, then you're multiplying when it comes to fractions. So, sometimes the problems will say 3/4 of Jimmy's crayons were blue. So you would, and he has 26 crayons, 3/4 of them were blue. So then you would multiply 3/4 times 26 because of that word of. So you're trying to figure out, like, when you multiply, you're actually trying to figure out like a portion. 1/2 of 4/5, well, that's 2/5, like I said. Hopefully you're not completely confused now. Okay, but we'll talk about that later. I'll go more in depth with that when we're looking at word problems. I'm going to keep that there. We're going to look at that problem again here in a second. So, sorry, Journey, I'm going to change back to purple. Okay, this bottom problem, this is another one where we are going to have to simplify. We have 3 times 2. That gives us 6. And 6 times 3, which is 18. Some of you are going to look at that and you already know what you can divide both by the numerator and denominator in order to simplify. If you don't, that's okay. You can list out the factors again. In this instance, we can divide both numbers by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 18 divided by 6 is 3. So 2/3 of 3/6 is 1/3. With multiplication, you know how you can go forward and backwards, meaning you can do 2 times 3 or 3 times 2 and get the same answer. So think of 3/6. If we simplify that, it's 1/2. So then it becomes just like the problem above. What is 1/2 of 2/3? Well, 1/2 of 2 is 1. Keep the denominator the same, and that's our answer. All right, I'm going to clean this up again for you with the smallest eraser there ever was. So before all this craziness happened, and we were talking about decimals, and we were practicing dividing decimals, and I said, remember that day, and I was talking about, okay, well, a fraction is really just a division problem. So we're going to look at this top problem that we did. We're going to look at it as division. So 1/2 is 0.5 as a decimal. I just knew that off the top of my head. If you don't, then you can always figure it out. 1 divided by 2. 2 does not go into 1. So we add the decimal and the 0. Bring our decimal up. How many times does 2 go into 10? 5 times. So we changed 1/2 into a decimal and got 0.5. Let's do the same for 4/5. That one might be a little trickier. I'm going to erase this because you might not know that off the top of your head. So we're going to work that out. 4 divided by 5. And 5 does not go into 4 evenly. Add a decimal and a 0. Bring our decimal straight up. How many times does 5 go into 40? It goes in perfectly 8 times. So 4/5 as a decimal is 8/10. So if we multiply those two together, we have 5 times 8, which is 40. So it's 4/10 or 40 hundredths. So now let's turn the answer that we got into a decimal. So we're going to do 2 divided by 5. 5 does not go into 2, so we have to add our decimal and 0. How many times does 5 go into 20? 4. So not that that's like the most practical thing, I'm just showing you that when you are multiplying fractions, you're really multiplying decimals too, because fractions are decimals. You can turn a fraction into a decimal, and you can turn a decimal into a fraction. So our answer here, when we multiply them as decimals, we got 4/10. And over here, when we, we got 2/5 or 0.4, which if you want me to prove that to you, 2 times 2, 5 times 2, which is 4/10. That you guys don't have to worry about for this week. I just kind of wanted to relate it back to decimals so you can see we're on the same path. We're still sort of working with decimals, it's just we're looking at them differently now. So for this week, there aren't that many problems that you have to do for multiplying fractions, and then you have to practice reducing. So when you're reducing, you just make sure that you are dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number. All right? Well, I hope that you guys are having a good day. After watching this, now you guys can exit tablet mode. Sure. Now you guys can go on and hopefully you can understand those problems a little bit better. All right, guys, I miss you.